Welcome to Sleeping with Sarah. I'm Sarah Albritton, a narcoleptic comedian, and this is the podcast where I interview people in my bed and we talk about sleep, comedy, and relationships. This week I interviewed the very awesome Erik Marino, who's a stand-up comedian and a TV writer. He's been around for a long time. He's written on Ellen, he's written on Weeds, he's written on SNL, he's a Peabody Award winner, and he's an Emmy-nominated writer. So for anybody that's an aspiring writer wanting to get into TV writing, this episode has so much awesome advice and information from Erik. He gives some amazing advice. Erik hosts Punching Bag Comedy at O'Keefe's in Brooklyn. Every Sunday there's a 6:30 show and an 8 p.m. open mic. He doesn't have a Twitter or Instagram, but he does have Facebook, so you can follow him on there. If you want to catch me, I have a show on the 18th, Wild and Weird Comedy at Bar Lubitsch at 8 p.m. So you can catch me live there. Sleeping with Sarah is brought to you by Audible.com. Go to audibletrial.com/sleepingwithsarah to get a free audiobook of your choice. This week, I'd like to recommend My Squirrel Days by Ellie Kemper. Again, that's audibletrial.com/sleepingwithsarah. If you like the podcast, please rate and review wherever you listen to podcasts on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spotify. Any of those spots would be amazing. Also, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Sarah Albritton. Well, let's get started with the show. Sleeping with Sarah. Welcome to Sleeping with Sarah. I'm Sarah Albritton, and I'm here with my guest.
I'm Erik Marino.
Erik Marino. How are you doing, Erik?
I'm good. How are you, Sarah?
I'm good. How'd you sleep last night?
Well, I slept on this is much nicer than where I slept. I slept on a couch last night, even though I could have slept on a bed, but I'm a big couch sleeper.
You prefer the couch instead of the bed?
I do. I think I'm one of those people that needs to get distracted to fall asleep. So I often have to watch TV, and somehow it's I'm not really going to bed. Going to bed is I think I never liked to be sent to bed as a child. Mm-hmm. So it's if I'm just watching TV and I happen to fall asleep, that's not going to bed.
Oh, so you used to be a child that would fight against the going to bed.
Oh yeah. I'm a big night owl, and I'm a TV-aholic. I really TV is very soothing to me.
Well, especially since you do writing,
Yeah. I was obsessed. When I was a kid, when I was a baby, I would actually break out of my crib and go down in the middle of the night and turn on a TV.
Really?
Oh yeah. It's a family story, and my mother was always trying to get me what are you gonna do for your life? It's you can't TVs can't be your life, and I showed her I got a degree in it. I've written on it. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I do. I made TV my career.
Yeah, you've been nominated for an Emmy.
I've been nominated for an Emmy, won a Peabody Award. That's writing on Saturday Night Live, which was a weird, crazy experience. I'm no longer on the show. I'm no longer on Saturday Night Live, but I was last season.
Yeah.
And I got nominated for an Emmy, and that was a fun experience. That's why I came back to town. Uh-huh. I lived in LA. I lived not here in your bed, but I lived in LA for 25 years, and I moved last year to New York, and I kept a place on both coasts. But they finally they kicked everybody out of my Sunset apartment, which was terrible.
That sucks.
And so now I finally moved to the big city.
Yeah.
Now I'm officially, I'm like a new New Yorker. So.
Interesting.
Which is why I decided to spend 2 weeks in LA hiding away from it. Because as soon as I go back, I fly back tomorrow, and then I'm officially
Really?
I don't know when I'm coming back to LA or doing anything else. It's I now will live in New York.
It's very different to move completely across the country. It's insane. And the differences of the cities are pretty big. I mean, the biggest thing that drives me nuts here in LA is that everything closes early.
That is crazy. I mean, I do enjoy being in New York now, especially where I live in, I'm sort of in Midtown Hell's Kitchen, and, bars stay open until 4.
Yeah.
And you're okay, especially there were certain times, there were late nights at Saturday Night Live, and you'd be okay, I just want one drink before I go home.
But then you'd have more.
No, I'd have a drink. You'd have a shot in a beer, a shot in a cider, and then you just head on home.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. I worry that because I know they passed something in California where they can have bars that are 4 a.m. I'm oh gosh, does that mean that Comedy Store is going to try to get out 3 a.m. spots and stuff? Is that...
Well, I mean, the one thing I think people think LA must be this huge party town. Cause you hear
It's not though.
No, it's really an industry town because it's one of those things where so many call times, if you really work in the business, Like
call times are early.
Call times, right? It's like, hey, I need to be on set at 6 a.m, which means I need to be up at like 5 o'clock, and I'm going somewhere. You know what I mean? Like, so you're not really. It's not as, you think it's like life in the fast lane, and oh my god, there must be these all night parties, and there are, but it's not. This city definitely sleeps. Oh
yeah, well they got to get their rest because they're working, and they're trying to keep up with East Coast time.
Also, it's like LA is one gigantic suburb. Like it's one gigantic. It's not a city at all.
It is very weird. That's like all the mini cities,
Right.
And the mini cities are even pretty big because Chicago,
right?
Like our neighborhoods were like matter of blocks or like,
Right.
And so it is very different that the neighborhoods are so big or miles. West Hollywood is probably a couple miles.
Sure.
And that's just, it's very different than when I was living in Chicago, and people still can tell that I'm new and I'm like, oh, I'll just walk to the Comedy Store. It's only a 20-minute walk.
Right.
If you're like, you're walking? What's wrong with you?
Well, now with all the, it's interesting to see how like Uber and Lyft have changed everything in LA. And then now, like, since I officially moved away in the summer, it's like suddenly this whole scooter thing happened.
Oh, yeah. The scooter thing, it's fun, but it can be quicker because you can just scoot around the sidewalk and like pass traffic. But the thing about scooters is that I guess they outlawed it in Beverly Hills and Santa Monica.
Did they really?
So, yeah.
Well, that's the interesting thing too about LA is there's that weird thing where Burbank, Santa Monica, and
West Hollywood,
no, but West Hollywood is part of LA, but like Beverly Hills isn't. Like Beverly Hills is its own city. Santa Monica is its own city. Burbank is its own city. But it's surrounded by... No, it's like West Hollywood
is
just...
Technically, like I could put West Hollywood, California on my...
Yeah, and you can put LA though too. But it's also like... But on the other hand, West Hollywood is like they don't have LAPD. They have sheriff.
Oh.
LAPD doesn't come through. It's sheriff.
Weird.
It's West Hollywood sheriff.
Well, I know that they've got a lot of their own rules, and so that's the difference. Is like in Chicago, we had aldermen for the different neighborhoods.
Sure.
But they still like the city laws were so that it's just so spread out, and it's like that's why I wanted to live somewhere central, kind of closer to clubs and stuff like that, so I could do,
No, this is totally like West Hollywood is as close to center LA. It's like it's as equal distant to downtown as it is to the beach.
As it is to the Valley.
Right, Valley or Culver City or the airport. Like if you had to work in Burbank at Disney or ABC, it's the same distance as it is to the airport. Like this is as close as you get to the heart of the city.
Yeah.
Centrally located.
That's what I was trying to do because I really lucked out in Chicago. I lived in Lakeview. I don't know if you've been to Chicago.
I have. I went there with the roast battle in season 1.
Oh, yeah? How was that?
Well, it was great. It was great. I was like one of those things where I was really drunk after the taping and walking back to the hotel, and I was lost, and I also was like, I was down to like 1% phone.
Oh no.
And then this lovely woman picked me up and offered me a ride, and then all of a sudden, like, as she dropped me off, she's like, I could come up to your hotel room and give you a massage. And I'm like...
That's a reverse Weinstein.
Well, I was like, is this what we have? It's like, I'm like, Chicago has like driving hookers or like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, usually it's like it's like the Johns in the car picking up the girl on the street. It's like, oh, but it's like the escort or the massage therapist is just driving around.
Yeah, I've never heard that. That's interesting. Where was it at? Do you know, a neighborhood?
Well, I was at the Acme Hotel. The Ace Hotel?
Ace Hotel. Oh, so like in the West Loop-ish.
Yeah. Wherever that is, since I don't know.
Yeah, I've been there. That's like trendy West Loop. It's like a newer... It used to be more shady.
Sure.
Like, it used to be more shady, just like a little bit north and just a little bit north of there. A few blocks, it was where Cabrini Green used to be. Okay. Which was like a big... that was like a big projects, thing that got torn down.
Oh, okay.
Like about 10 years ago, it got torn down, and then it got all gentrified. But it used to be like a real dangerous area.
Right.
And then now it's like a trendy area where people buy their lofts and shit.
Well, I'm all about trendy areas. Mm-hmm. That's why I live in Hell's Kitchen now in New York.
Is that the trendiest area?
No, it's hip. It's cool. It's like great. 9th. I live between 8th and 9th, and it's like 9th is all like cool restaurants.
Which clubs can you walk to?
The Broadway. Well, it's New York. You can walk to all of them. But I'll just walk. But I live very close to the Broadway, which is on like 52nd. And, but I have to start going out a lot more. It's like, I keep basically moving to New York, and like, I'll finally, when I fly back tomorrow, it's like, okay, now I'm in New York for good.
Well, and also being on SNL, you probably didn't get out and do a ton outside of the, like, what was that process like?
Well, that was like what I was saying. It's like, so I technically, like, okay, so I'll have moved I moved a year ago, and so I've had my apartment in New York for a year. Mm-hmm. But in a way, I have to say, like, I didn't live in New York City. I lived at Saturday Night Live in New York City.
Yeah, because you didn't really leave that much.
Right, no, you're just sort of there. Like, I had this, and it's also like, it was like a 10-minute walk away from Rockefeller Center, 30 Rock. And it was like, for like another experience, like, so I went to the Olympics in Rio in 2016 with Leslie Jones. And how
did you get that? Are you just friends with her? Or?
I was her writer. That's how I got on SNL. Like, Leslie and I were friends for about 8 years. We're like best friends, and I became like sort of her, like, I'd be her opener, her feature. And then it was like one of the things that I do, I came in differently than a lot of comics. Mm-hmm. Whereas it's like a lot of people, they do comedy where they're from, Chicago, Boston, and then they start getting a little act, or, you know, I don't mean, you know, it's like they get their acts together and then they make a move. Whereas I had a degree in television. I came out here, I did like stand up at the Comedy Store when I was like 22, but I got stage fright. And so then I went, I was interning and PAing, and then I became a writer's assistant.
Oh, so you went the writer's assistant path.
Right, I went the writer's assistant path. So then it's a weird thing. Like, I was a writer's assistant on Ellen, when Ellen came out of the closet in 97.
Oh,
like,
Ellen,
the old ABC
TV show, not the talk show.
Right. I worked on the original, I worked on it before and during and after she came out of the closet.
And were you writing on it or PA?
I was a PA, and then I became a writer's assistant the year, like, my first year in a writer's room is the year she comes out of the closet. Ah. And so, like, I get jokes in, like, we win an Emmy for the puppy episode. That's the episode she comes out of. But so it's also one of those weird things where I've already been in meetings. I've been in, like, you know, big ABC, Disney Network studio meetings on tons of shows that I've worked on. I worked on Weeds. I worked on the Hughleys. I worked on 2 shows with Cedric the Entertainer. Lots of pilots.
So you're a writer first, and then because of the stage fright, how long did you wait to do
so? Then I was like, I go back, I moved to that Sunset apartment, which is 2 blocks from the Comedy Store, and I moved there when I get the Hughleys in 98. In 98, I moved to Sunset and be like, I'm going to be 2 blocks. I quite literally spent 6 years going, I'll go to the Comedy Store open mic next Sunday. I'll go to the Laugh Factory next Tuesday. And but meanwhile, I was like writing and PAing. You're delivering scripts in the middle of the night because email wasn't like it is now. And so you deliver stuff in the middle of the night. You get their lunches. You get food thrown at you. Then you're a writer's assistant. So you take notes in the corner. And sometimes you get if they're stuck and they need something, like, you're allowed to pitch. It's like you speak when spoken to. Yes. And if you're going to say something, you better score.
Actually, I love, just in general, like, rules for if you get lucky enough to become a writer's assistant, what are some, like, unspoken rules that you're supposed to know?
Speak when spoken to. It's like you're there. Your job, number one, is to capture what everybody else in the room is saying. It's like they're the paid writers, and your job, what you're being paid to do, is record what everybody's saying. So you'll sit there on a computer. Oftentimes, your computer is hooked up to a large monitor. So the writers in the room can also see, right? Now, I'm like, I like to say that my typos have won Emmys, but it was also like, when you have like 8 to 14 writers and they're all looking, and every time you type something, they're like, dude, you spelled it wrong. You know what I mean? And then there's the other part of like, a writer will pitch. So you also you have to get this ability to like listen to multiple people at the same time and sort of catch, that's the joke. That's the funniest joke. Or it's like, and also know that somehow you have to know the social political power dynamic of, this is the head writer, and you take your cues from him or her and follow along with like, and some writers will get mad. They're like, why aren't you typing down what I'm saying? I'm like, 'cause we haven't made that decision. It's like, and then you'll type it and then someone will beat it, or like, I knew that joke wasn't going to last, and so you do, so, it's like, but it's like, and it's like, hey, it's also, I would say this, a writer's room is a real sanctuary. And if you're in a writer's room, especially like a sitcom writer's room, you pull everything out of yourself. Like, so you're going to know, you're going to know every writer's I know which writer has a daughter who's a kleptomaniac. I know which person is cheating on their spouses. Which person has done this, or it's like all your sort of secrets come out. It's
a very personal, intimate space.
Because you're trying to pull anything out of you to make an episode. For example, like there's a Christmas episode on Ellen where her parents give Ellen a grave site. Like for a Christmas present, they give her a burial plot. And that was based on Dave Flabbot, who's now the creator of I'm Dying Up Here.
I really liked that show.
Right. Well, he had cystic fibrosis and had to get a lung transplant, but he was never his family always expected him to die very young. So it was one of those things where this family had like a family mausoleum and they were like, well, David, this is your spot in the mausoleum. And he was like, and now it's like they expect him to die when he was like 8 or 12 or whatever. And now he was in his 30s or 40s and married. He's like, I'm not going to get married in the family. I'm not going to get buried in the family mausoleum. It's like, I'm going to get buried next to my wife, et cetera, et cetera. But that's an example of like using your personal experience to pull something out, like a strange family experience or personal experience. Mm-hmm. And then we use it, and that became the Christmas episode of that year. Sure.
So how many writers' rooms have you written in? You said like 4.
So I was a writer's assistant or script coordinator for Ellen, the Hughleys, the first 2 seasons of the Hughleys. I did Weeds for the first 2 seasons. Then I also wrote on the Hughleys. Cedric the Entertainer Presents, which was a sketch show with Cedric and like Kyle Dunnigan. Excuse me.
So what's the difference between like the sitcom versus the sketch shows? Because obviously you've written on a couple sketch shows.
Well, each one's different. Okay, so like a sketch show there's multi-camera and there's single camera. Mm-hmm. So like Ellen and the Hughleys we tape almost like a play. Yeah. So what you do, that's like on Monday you do a table read typically. So you would read a new script on Monday morning. Mm-hmm. And if it's any good, then the actors will go, you'll get notes from the writers. I mean, you'll get notes. We all sit around and read it. The cast, the director will read the stage directions. And then if it's good, we'll get notes from the network and the studio. And then the writers will go back and we'll order lunch and then we'll start rewriting. And the actors will go down to stage and they might block out some scenes. Now, if there's a much bigger problem, especially a huge, massive problem, like there's something called a page 1 rewrite. Which means we're throwing out the entire script and starting on page 1. Oh. So, like, for example, there was an episode of Ellen that was a page 1 rewrite, which meant we're going to send the actors home because we're not even going to waste your time. Okay. Okay. And then you would go back to the writer's room and you order lunch. Lunch is very important. Okay. Lunch is very important.
Lunch and coffee, right?
Oh, yeah. Lunch and coffee are, it's a lot of people don't understand that, film crews, TV crews are an army and they, an army moves on its stomach. You have to have great craft service. You have to have lunch. I will also tell anybody out there who's trying to get in this business and you're a PA or a writer's assistant, double check the orders. Always double check the orders. And I'm going to tell you this. I've seen it so many times in so many shows. One writer is just going to be jinxed and somehow that order and it's a different writer every year and you can never, but it's like somehow their order will always get messed up. It'll just always get screwed up. And then you're the guy that gets the blame. I mean, remember Ellen and I once watched one of a writer I watched an Emmy-winning writer chuck a fish taco at a PA's head.
Seriously?
Oh yeah.
Do people get fired over that, or we're getting a wrong order?
No, I mean, they can. You can get fired for anything. I mean, it's like, I've been both like the best writer's assistant and the worst writer's assistant, because being a writer's assistant is a very personal, you need to get along. It's like you have to be simpatico with the writers. Yeah. You have to be able to hear them and follow them and take cues, both spoken and unspoken, and move this thing along. And sometimes like, Ellen I worked on Ellen for 3 seasons, and every year we had a new showrunner. And the first year I was I was the writer's PA, so I'm getting their lunches, and I was training in to be a writer. And then the second year I was a writer's assistant.
How did you get the writer's PA job? Was that just luck?
What happened? I'll tell you. I'll tell you what happened. It was a bit of luck. It's my old one of my best friends, who's now like a producer, line producer on a lot of Disney shows. But we grew up together, and I said, "Come out, I moved out to LA first, and then I kept saying, "Come out here." And I went to Syracuse, he went to Colorado. We both had degrees in like TV, film, and I mean, guys, when you first start out, you do whatever job you can. Like, you PA commercials, sometimes it's like my buddy Kevin once got paid in, I think he was working on a Foster Farm chicken commercial, and he literally got paid in like the frozen chicken breast they didn't use, some knives, and a cutting board. And I still have the cutting board in my New York apartment to this day. But then it's like you do that. You do things for free, or do things just get paid for lunch, or $50. And then those people remember you, and they'll if you're good, they'll remember you the next time. So it was one of those things. And then by working for free for chicken, my old roommate Kevin, he got a job on a commercial. Another commercial became a pilot. That became like the Gene Wilder thing. Then he did another pilot. That pilot got picked up, which was called Madman of the People, which is, to give you an example, it was 1994 NBC must-see TV. Here was the lineup. At 8 o'clock was Mad About You with Paul Reiser and Helen Hunt. Mm-hmm. At 8:30 was a brand new show called Friends. I don't know if you heard of it, but it was a brand new show. At 9, Seinfeld. Mm-hmm. 9:30, Madman of the People with Dabney Coleman, my show, and Kevin's show. And then at 10, another new show, ER. Now, it's the ultimate...
What year is this?
It's 1994, and it's the ultimate, like, one of these shows is not like the others, where quite literally 5 to 6 million people would turn off TV at 9:30, go walk their dogs, put their kids to bed, whatever they did, and then they would turn their TV back on and watch ER. Mm. And so it was like there was this big dip, and we got canceled at we were like number 5 or 6 in the country. But it was like, and by the way, anyone right now any TV network would kill for the numbers that we had then.
It's changed so much now.
Oh, totally.
And I don't even know how much you can even trust the Nielsen ratings and all that stuff now because of, on demand and watching it online.
Sure. Okay, so then, but to answer the question it was like my buddy was a PA now on Madman of the People, and then as what will happen over and over is they never really hire a writer's assistant job is a really kind of tough, overworked job. And they're usually, whenever possible, they're going to try to get away with 1 or 2 people when what they really need is
3 or 4.
Well, you need like 3. You need at least 2, but it's like if you need 2, they're probably only hired 1. And if they hire 2, you're going to need 3. It's just the way it is. And so it was one of those things where they had 2 writer's assistants. They needed a 3rd. They really liked Kevin's, he was a good PA, and so they promoted him in-house, and then they needed somebody to, they needed somebody to take Kevin's PA spot. So then I was like, hey, I'm his roommate and available, and I was able to go right in, and it's like, so one of my good friends who I work with on Ellen, and his name's Chris Dorenzo, and he's the guy who wrote Rock of Ages. Oh, okay, the Broadway musical. Yeah. Well, one of the great things, and I've been friends with him for years, but one of the great things he always said is, the expression, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Mm-hmm. He said, yeah, that's true, but it's not just who you know, it's who knows you. Mm-hmm. In other words, I have a PA job. We have an opening as a writer's assistant or a production assistant. Why am I, Sarah, let's call Sarah. That's what I'm saying. It's like, it's not just you get your resume in. It's like, who's thinking about you? This person, I have a job opening, and who can I look to that I know that is willing to do it or would be good at it, even if they maybe don't have a ton of experience, they're willing to learn. Yeah. So it's, it's who wants it? Who's in your, and who's in your, why are you in their thoughts when there's a job opening? Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're a comic they like, you're a writer they liked your writing sample. It's like, hey, it's one of those things like, hey, if you get your writing sample in front of somebody and it's good, maybe they can't help you right now, but if it's good enough, they'll keep you in mind. And it really is like,
And that's why I try to do, even though it's, trying to do the fellow. And I know that those are all so many shots in the dark with the fellowships every year, but it's like, somebody reads it, maybe they'll remember a name eventually,
Right. The only thing I'm going to say, like, advice I give to people who are writing is, like, great advice. This actually comes from the writer Neil Gaiman, is your job as a writer is to keep people turning pages. That's your job. It's like, you need to keep me, if you give me something, I need to keep reading it. So don't waste, use as few words as possible, because eyeball time is precious. You only are going to keep, and you can only get somebody to read something really once. You get one fresh bite. You can't be like, well, I wrote 88 pages of this 100-page script. It's not done, but I like you. It's like, no, don't. Another key is, for writers out there, finish. The difference between being a successful writer and a wannabe writer is writers finish. Mm-hmm. Because if I have 20, I have like 50 million great opening scenes to movies.
Yeah.
I have a great first 20 pages.
Yeah.
But if you don't have the whole thing, that's no one.
Yeah. I really love Neil Gaiman. Actually, I've got a couple of his quotes on my little writing wall thing.
I'm a huge fan.
He's got some really great advice for writers. So that's awesome. I hadn't heard that quote yet, but I like that.
Yeah, I think it's in the Sandman book. I mean, it's like the Sandman companion.
Yeah.
Another great one is Salinger. I think it's like in Seymour in Introduction. It's like he's like, before you were ever a writer, you were a reader. So think about the thing you would most want to read in the world, mm-hmm. and then steal it from yourself. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like, I love pirates, or I love, you know what I'm saying? It's like, think of the story that really, it's like the same thing goes for a comic or any art. It's like, what painting would I want to look at, and then paint it? So be meta out there, guys. Think about what you most want to see, what really entertains you, and then bring it to us.
That's awesome.
I know, I'm pretty awesome.
So then at what point during your process of working in TV did you decide to overcome your stage fright and start doing stand-up? Okay, so I moved 2 blocks away from the Comedy Store in 98 to work on the Hughleys. But I also will now spend about a year and a half living a block and a half away from the Comedy Store, still not going. You never went?
I would just, I'll go next Sunday. I'll go, I mean, I'm telling you.
You kept...
And I'm telling you, by this point, like, Ellen has won an Emmy. I've now written an episode and a half of the Hughleys. Like, so I've written now, it's to the point where I think I'm 29 years old. And partly what happens is there was a lot, I'd written like the last episode of season 2 of the Hughleys. I'd been a writer's assistant script coordinator for 2 years. They were great. And there was a lot of like, hey, when we come back for season 3, Marino, you're on staff. Like, mm-hmm. You're going to be, one of the new, story editors or whatever. And I was like, great. And, I had my first, if you guys don't know, you get about, for a sitcom back in 98, you get about $18,000 to write a script.
Oh, wait, to write a script?
One script, for example, and then just so you know, it's like you get paid $18,000 before taxes. And then if it reruns on network, you'll get like $9,000, and that's what a residual. And then if it gets on network again, it gets like $4,500.
Wait, every time it reruns, you got paid that much?
It gets cuts in half and gets cuts in half. Every rerun that gets cut in half. So you get 18, then you get 9, then you get 4.5.
So not like the Friends episodes are like 4 cents.
No, right. But there's also a point where I remember hearing this. Like, supposedly, if you wrote an episode of Friends with all the reruns and syndication, basically you would make $250,000 for one episode. Oh my God. TV money is crazy money.
Yeah.
Man,
Seinfeld, man.
And even the fact that it's like, remember, so I write on SNL, and if they rerun an episode, if they rerun an episode I wrote on, I'll get paid for that. But if they rerun it, so now they do it, if they run it in prime time before 11 o'clock, I will make more money than if they run it at 11:30 in the late night spot.
Gotcha. But still, even if you're a co-writer for an episode, or just as a credited writer at all, or the main writer, because in sitcom you get basically one writer's usually accredited.
No. There's a story credit. For example, I have a story credit for a Halloween episode, which I get I got $5,000 for originally or something like that. And then I have a full episode where it's like story plus teleplay. Like you write the script and the story. And so that's like the 18th hour. And where was I going with that?
Oh, you're talking about money and how...
Oh, right. Oh, what I was going to tell you was, for example, just yesterday I deposited a $9.17 check from a residual check from the Hughleys. Something I did like in 1999 and 2000.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And there's like, if you don't know, there's a bar called Residuals in the Valley that used to have a wall that's just full of like checks, like a dime, a penny, 2 cents. And it's like you would go in with your 2-penny check and you would like get a free shot or a drink or whatever.
Yeah, that was part of it. So you get a free shot.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Well, it's not free. You had to pay your residual. You had to
pay your dues. I get it.
Okay, so it's 1998. I think I'm gonna go. I'm sorry. It's 2000, and it's one of those things where I got like 15 grand in my bank account, and it's like I'm spending money. I'm going to opening day for the Red Sox up in Seattle, and I'm like I'm the best man in my best friend's wedding, Kevin, and he was getting married in Colorado, so it's like I'm dropping like $1,000 on his bachelor party, because I also think I'm gonna be on season 3 of the Hughleys, and 2 great writers that really helped me were Matt Wickline, who was the creator of the Hughleys, and John Bowman, who was the co-exec of the Hughleys, but he was also the creator of Martin. And these guys would also later, I'd work with them on Cedric the Coach and Cedric the Entertainer Presents, and they're great guys, and they were really helpful for me. But season 3, Bob Greenblatt and David Gennellari, decided to renegotiate Matt Wickline and John Bowman's contracts. And the 2 guys decided to walk away. And when they walked away, that was my assurance of being on staff. And so suddenly I went from, hey, Marino, you're going to be on staff season 3 of the Hughleys, to you don't have a job.
I hear that happens a lot.
Oh, it does. It totally does. And so then the crazy thing happened was I had this neighbor, Victoria, who then I found out was going to the Comedy Store every Sunday to do the potluck. And I went, you go every Sunday?
It used to be Sunday nights.
It was Sundays. And then it went Sunday Mondays, and then it went Sunday Monday Tuesdays, and then it went Sunday Mondays, and then it went to Mondays.
Now it's Monday.
It's Monday, right. It's been Mondays for about 8 years now.
Yeah.
But it was like, when I found out Victoria, I was like, Victoria, you go every Sunday to the Comedy Store? She's like, yeah. And I was like, well, I'm way funnier than you. And it was also the point, like, in that weird sense, it's like, now it was like, so I'm 29 years old, and I guess I was old enough or mature enough to bomb. And I had the confidence of like, hey, I've written jokes that got on TV. I've written stuff that's like, that at least in my mind, you could say, well, I've made millions of people laugh. I have entertained millions of people on television. I've written stuff, like, I've gotten jokes that won an Emmy. So now I'm going to go out. Now I have to do it on my own. Now I had to see if I could. It's like, I knew I could write for Ellen. I knew I could write for DL. And it's like, now it's like, can I do it?
Can you write for yourself?
Can I write for myself? Can I make people like me? So I always sort of say that I got serious about my comedy in October of 2000. Okay. Which was also about, that's like 7 years after I moved out here.
Gotcha.
Right.
Wow. And so then
then I did open mic with, Bobby Lee was the host of open mic back then, and Joey Diaz helped me out a lot. And Ari Shaffir broke my balls. Mm-hmm. And then you just you just start getting in, and then it's the weird thing where it's like I had the advantage of not just trying to do stand-up, but I was also getting jobs. Like, I would work on Weeds, I would work on Cedric the Entertainer, I'd get these pilots. And so then other comics would see me in writers' rooms. And like, all of a sudden I was seen in a different light. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those things like
that helped you out with stand-up because you were in a writer's room.
And so then it was one of those things where it's like, one of the reasons I could help Leslie, where it was like, I've been in meetings with department heads and studio execs that these guys haven't been to yet, but are going, like, if your career goes right, you're going to be headed that way. Yeah. But even though it's not my show, and I was just a writer's assistant. I was a PA. I'm a script coordinator or a writer. But now you saw the other side of it. And so that's how, and then also like the ability to be, like I said, you have to be able to listen to multiple people at once. But there's another part that I always thought about being a writer assistant. In a way, you're the first audience, right? So it's like a laugh from me in the corner kind of is like, oh, we made the kid in the corner laugh. That must be good. Let's keep going towards that. And so I think I have an ability that not a lot of comics have, which is to be able to listen to other comics and be like a sounding board or like, hey, it's like, because we're all so alone.
I think that it feels that way sometimes, but I think when you start to build your own close network of friends,
but you need somebody like it's like, especially it's a crazy chemical thing that's happening in your brain when you're on stage where you're like, I'm trying to remember my jokes and I'm trying to read the audience and get the feedback. And then I'm trying to remember what I want to say next. And you're not objective. It's totally subjective.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's why you need to record yourself, videotape as much as possible, but definitely audio record yourself because you're biased.
Yeah.
And you can't remember, like, you're going to think, oh, that bombed, or maybe that worked. And then you go, oh, that didn't work as well. Now that I hear it, it didn't work as well as I think it did. Or maybe it's like, oh, I don't even realize. I thought that joke bombed. And you don't know why. But then you listen back and you're like, oh, I didn't say, I missed a sentence.
Yeah.
I should have said not, or I did say not, and I'm not supposed to say not. Like, you say things wrong.
Yeah.
And there's a weird part sometimes where you can actually say, like, if I read a transcript of what you said, it means almost the exact opposite, like somehow, but the audience gets what you mean, even if it comes out kind of jumbled and wrong. There's a weird moment.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing about stand-up. It's always different. That's so awesome that you got to write on so many shows. That's pretty cool. But it seems like it is kind of inconsistent overall. Like, the life of a writer is, like, you got to be prepared for inconsistency or, like, not, like, losing a job, like, having a job one day and losing it the next. Well,
okay. One is, Survival is success in Hollywood. As long as you're here. I mean, in New York, it's like, if you as long as you're like, you don't give up. You don't quit. It's like you have to, but it's up and down. I mean, part of the magic of it is, okay, every time I go on the road, I'll be driving in some town or driving around and all of a sudden, like, you'll see the people that, this person goes to this Starbucks every day. And they go to their job every day. And it's like, right now, I mean, I have no idea what I'm going to do next.
It's exciting.
Yeah, it's scary. It's frightening. Some people can't do that. But I don't want to live in a gerbil wheel life. Like, I don't go to gyms because they remind me of, why would I just work out in this gerbil wheel?
Oh.
You know what I'm saying? Like, gyms, like treadmills, like, they're literally just gerbil wheels. It's like, whereas, like, I'll go for a hike or a walk or, like, let's have an adventure. Let's go and have new, good.
I can't ever do something where I'm doing this. Like, I just fall asleep because I get bored. I literally can't have the monotony in my life because I will just be bored and fall asleep.
Right. But the excitement comes with, it's like, it's a roller coaster. It's like, oh my God. It's like, I'm on SNL. Oh my God, I'm not on SNL. Oh my God, I got nominated for an Emmy. Oh, we didn't win the Emmy. It's one of those things, like, you get jobs, you get money, there's feast and there's famine. And it's really hard it's all in your head. I mean, it's a mind game. It's like, okay, are we stand-up comics? Because right now we're not doing stand-up comedy. Right now we're talking about stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
You're only doing stand-up when you're on a microphone. True. Everything else is like...
But I feel like being a stand-up is way more than just doing stand-up. You have to do the writing. You've got to do the work.
Sure.
You have to do the thing I'm learning about LA is the networking, the
hang. It's like hang. You have to be a professional hanger. It's like you have to be, and that's one of the hardest thing on relationships is girlfriends and boyfriends don't ever really understand. Like,
oh yeah.
You're just hanging out. You're just goofing around. It's like, yes, that is the job.
I've had to explain that to people and I've made it a point. Anybody I've dated here, I let them know I'm here for a fucking reason. Comedy's always going to come before you. You deal with it now or you leave. And that sounds really harsh, but, and some people stay around. Some people it's not for them, but I let them know up front because then later on, if they're like, but you picked this over me. I'm like, I told you this from day one.
But see, it's like the reason that like Chappelle and Chris Rock and Louis C.K., Dave Attell, it's like these guys have known each other and hung with each other for 25, 30 years.
Yeah.
And that's like, now it's like, and everyone, it's like, look, everyone who starts comedy thinks like, in 3 years.
Oh, no.
In 5 years. It's like, and we all have to fool ourselves. But it's also like, you know, like Steve Martin in his book about, like, the very first sentence is like, it took me 10 years to get good at stand-up.
Yeah.
It takes 10 years.
Yeah.
And also, to anyone out there listening, because I run a lot of beginner open mics, you do a joke is a weird thing. How long have you been in it?
Almost 5.
Okay, 5. So you might really have already experienced this. You probably did a joke in your first 6 months. That was a good joke, but it didn't work. It just didn't work. So you let it go. Mm-hmm. Like, it's just somewhere in a notebook somewhere.
Yeah.
And then, like, year 3 or 4 or year 5, all of a sudden, like, for some reason, you decide to bring it back out again, and it works.
Yeah, I've actually rewritten some old jokes and, like, looked back, and, like, I had a lot of good ideas back then, but I either didn't have the stage presence or the way, or know how to work with an audience then. And one of my favorite jokes is a joke that I rewrote. It was a joke I told in my first 6 months.
Right.
And it's a joke I rewrote, I think, in my second or third year.
Right.
And then it totally works, and I still use it. I like it.
It's your bottle, every comic, every performer is a bottle of wine. And there's a certain point where if you go back, I mean, really to anybody, go back and listen to anybody's first sets. And you're going to notice their voice is a little tighter. Like you're scared.
Man, actually
And you've crashed and burned so many times now that it doesn't, you're not scared. I mean, you're still scared. There's energy, but you're not scared like you used to be scared. And you'll be like, okay, you know what? I sucked tonight. I've sucked before. I'll suck again. But it just doesn't freak you out. Like there's that, it's like, when the moon landing, they kept crashing people into the moon. Mm-hmm. Like they had to, like they'd simulate you. We basically wanted to simulate fear out of people. We're going to keep simulating you crashing the moon. So if you actually start getting these readings on the day we're going to land on the moon, you don't panic. Like, you know, one of the nicest things people say to me is like, look, there are sometimes up there you're struggling and it's like people are like, Eric, you look like you didn't give a shit. And I'm like, no, I do because I care and I know that I'm bombing. So inside I'm like pedaling as fast as I can to get this thing on track. But it's like, but on the surface, it looks like I'm in more control than I feel. And that's a positive.
That is. Thinking back to what you said about people's first jokes, I wonder, that would be kind of an interesting segment. People like that were several years in, like where if they had an old notebook, they just have to go tell their old jokes. That'd be a fun show. Where it's just old jokes or like, you know, just seeing if they work or not. But it has to be from like your first year, you know, it has to be the way you wrote it, you know, and just see how it works.
Oh my God. Yeah, exactly.
That'd be kind of fun. But yeah. And then Show Up, Go Up you created. I
created the Show Up, Go Up, right, which was a spin-off of the Roast Battle show. Like, the Roast Battle started as Brian Moses started on, like, a Tuesday night. There was an open mic. And he used to do segments. That, like, I had a segment. It was, like, Secrets of the Universe with Professor Marino. And other people had little segments. And people would do open mic. And we'd pull, you know, names from Sombrero. And then the Roast Battle became this massive segment. Yeah. And it started dominating. And then became the whole show. And then it was like, we got rid of the open mic and it became like a book show. There's a pre-show before the battle. And it became so big that it's like we drove out the open mic. So then it was like, we moved the open mic and Moses was like, you know, Marino, I want you to host it. Like, so he gave me, you know, it's like, so now we were doing this open mic on Sunday nights. And part of it was, how do you get people, because there are 3 rooms in the Comedy Store, as you know, but people who are listening who don't know. There are 3 rooms in the Comedy Store. This is the upstairs belly room, which is where the Roast Battle started, and where it is every Tuesday night now. But so it was like, how do you get people to come to an open mic in the belly room on a Sunday night from 10:30 to 1 in the morning? And why do they stay there? And how do you get them to stay in the room and not like go down at the bar? Mm-hmm. And I realized, and I was thinking about it in that day. Like, it was sort of magical. Like, all of a sudden, I just came up with the name Show Up, Go Up. Like, you have to show up to go up. And I said there'll be no list. Like, I wasn't going to be, like, you know, there wasn't going to be any list of, oh, you know, you're up 5. If you knew you were up 5th, then you're not going to stay in the room. You're going to be down having a beer, smoking pot in the back. And it was like, but it's like...
So did you start the lotto mics in LA?
No. I mean, the name of that... In fact, we didn't do names in the bucket. And then, but one of the things we did was, I didn't know who was going up next. And if I don't know, as a host, if I didn't know who's going up next, then you don't know who's going up next. And if you want to go up next, you have to stay in the room. And then it was like, then we did other things, like we did the joke challenge, which was like, it's like at a certain point, like you don't have enough time to give everyone who's there 3 minutes.
Yeah.
But it's like, I can get 3 to 5 people on stage right now, and each one tells one joke, and then the audience votes who gets the next 3 minutes. And then that became a game in itself. And then we created, the last part of Show Up, Go Up is called Last Joke, where it's like everyone who's in the room at the end of the night gets to tell at least one joke. Which to me was like, that's creating the open mic that I wanted to go to if I started. Cause like, you go to open mics.
It's like you go. I feel so bad for anyone that starts in LA because the open mics here now, like.
Right. But you could go for weeks and you buy you'll buy drinks, you'll support the room and you don't get up and you don't get up. It's like, if you don't go, like, and if you don't get up like within 3-4 weeks of going to an open mic, you're going to bail.
Yeah.
So in one way it was like, and people, we called the Show Up, Go Up the most misunderstood show in comedy because people would get mad and they get really mad at me about stuff, and I was like, I'm at least you get to touch the mic and tell one piece of material, at the bare minimum, and then it's like if you play the joke challenge, we would do a text challenge. We did a thing that was called best reason, like give me the best reason why you should go up next. And then people would vote on that.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, and then Willie Hunter was like an interviewer. We did a thing called the Willie Hunter Open Mic Interview where we're like, hey, lots of open mics you can work on your set, but where can you work on your interview skills? Like hopefully,
I like that.
It's like if you're successful, you're going to be on Fallon, you're going to be on Colbert, right? And
you better be able to give a good story interview. That's not just your stand-up on,
and so Willie Hunter's our master interviewer. Willie Hunter, like co-creator of the Carmichael Show. And now on the Little Rel Show as a writer. And he's a writer, a comedian, and a host. Like that's the three things we are comedians. Willie and I are both writers, comedians, and hosts. Because those are actually 3 different skills.
Yeah.
I mean, not everyone can do those. It's all comedy.
Yeah. But
it's slightly different.
Yeah.
You can write, writing's about structure. Stand-up is about you and your act. And then hosting is really sometimes framing things. You also have to know, like, you can't just be positive. Like, honesty goes so far. Like, if somebody sucks,
you gotta say, you gotta be like, all right,
Okay, like, I get so many, there's one bit I would do, someone would eat it, and I'd just go up on stage and be like, I feel there aren't enough apologies in comedy, so I just want to apologize for that. I'm sorry. It's like, it's like, you become an honest broker to the audience. Like, oh, I can trust the host. He's no bullshit. Mm-hmm. So that was the whole thing. And then, it's like, so there are lots of ways to get on stage and you could create segments. And that's a fun thing. And like one of the greatest things is that the Show Up, Go Up still exists, even though I'm in New York and, Al and Sarah and Mark, keep it going at the Sycamore Tavern. And that's, as I said the other night when I was visiting, it was like, that's a greater honor than winning the Emmy because this is something. The Show Up, Go Up is something I created, and also it's like, and guys out there, if you're trying to create shows, something I learned from Brian Moses in the Roast Battle is like, you do need a community to create these shows. It's like, you need all these people to feel involved and have some sort of stake in it.
That's good. That's a very good point.
17% funnier.
Yeah.
You didn't invite me to your bed for no reason.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. That's just that's a very good. So the way I looked at it was like, it can't be just a regular stand-up show because then, you're competing with stand-up shows at the Improv and at the Comedy Store and people could see people that are on TV all the time. So what is your show going to stand out? Is the way I kind of look at it.
Right. I always thought, for me, it's like, there are a million open mics where you can go and work on your act. But I was trying to create a show where let's break you outside of what you normally do. Let's find new ground. And it's like, I had people like, from the very first night, I had 2 great comics, Ed Greer and Clee Wiggins. And they're both really close friends of mine. And I knew the very first night I would give both of these people stage time, but they also dated and lived together, but they never performed together. And for some reason I saw them sitting and they did the greatest thing where they didn't bother me they didn't beg me for mic time. And I knew I'd put them up. And all of a sudden I was just sort of struck and I'm like, I'm like, I looked over at Clea and Ed and I said, Clea, Ed, I'll give you a little time, but I'm like, I will give you guys 5 minutes. And everyone else is doing 3-minute sets, but I'll give you two guys 5 minutes every week on the show. If you come up and don't do your act, but you talk about what it's like to live with each other. And like, you're two comedians who live with each other. And that became, we called it, Clea and Ed, the Ed and Clea Show. And they did a regular segment, and then that became a podcast. You know what I'm saying? It's like, Mia Mars has a segment, the Switcheroo, the Switcheroo.
Yeah, the Switcheroo. And then you got Mia does the dating one.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. And like the Switcheroo is this really funny, it's sort of like the anti-roast battle. It's like it's watching someone do your act and vice versa. And it's almost like, it's a weird compliment.
I haven't done roast battle yet. I almost wonder if I'm too. I don't know. Like it had to be someone I know.
It's
really
a whole
well.
roast battle. Roasting is a whole different skill. It's really interesting.
It's a separate. That's a fourth skill. You got writing.
Totally.
You got hosting. You got stand up. You got roasting.
Yeah, no, roasting is a totally different skill because you'll watch people. You watch like the roast battle. Watch the people who are breaking in, and I'm already like this person's already on Comedy Central as a roast battler, but some of them aren't necessarily as stand-ups.
Yeah.
They're not as developed as acts as they are as roasters.
Yeah, some people are born to roast, I think, versus, because some of their stand-up, it's like their stand-up's good, just not nearly the level that they're roasting.
Right. Yeah. I mean, even like Moses, who's the creator of the show, and Jeff Ross. I mean, Jeff Ross only battled recently. Mm-hmm. I mean, and he's the roast master general. And Moses has never, I mean, he's the host, he's the referee, he's the Mackay Pfeiffer from 8 Mile of this thing, and he's never battled. I mean, it was like, it's an interesting experience to battle, but it is really hard.
The wave seems like fun. I would love to be part of the wave. That would be fun.
That's a wild thing. It was an interesting evolution to see the whole show. Like, cause I battled once, but it was also before the wave existed. The show really evolved over time. It's very, very interesting.
Yeah. I like the wave. I think that would be, I think that looks like a lot of fun to be part of the wave.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh, it is. We done some crazy things. There's been the gay wave. There was the terrorist wave. There have been variations of the wave. That was really something to see. And we would have arguments about should the wave be allowed to get on stage or not on stage. Like I think currently in the new Comedy Central version, they can't go on stage like they did earlier. And it was like, that brought it all the way back to an earlier time.
Well, I think it just brings the energy up so much, I love it when they do it,
Oh, it's just a whole thing. It's all verbal, and then here's this act out comedy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I was actually talking to Willie about that, and he said that he loves doing it,
Sure.
Like, people are like, well, you're a writer, why are you doing that?
So there's Willie Hunter, who's a writer, a comic, a host, a battler.
A creator.
Right, I mean, he's a battler, and he's a wave member.
Yeah.
I mean, and the first time we ever took the wave anywhere, I mean, we took the roast battle to La Jolla. And that was the first time it ever did a road show. And that was the first time the wave, after the show, it went great. But after the show, it's the audience, totally wanted to talk to Jeff Ross. They're very excited. Mm-hmm. And, we went to this other bar. And it was very interesting to watch people, flock around Jeff, but then also flock around Jamar, Jeremiah, and Willie. And it was the wave is I'm still, I would love to, I think they're a modern day Three Stooges or you could do something like the old Monkeys TV show with them. I've always thought that.
Oh, that's kind of fun.
Yeah.
I could totally see that. Yeah. It's very cool to see all these things that have evolved over time that still exist, that how they've changed and how comedy's changed and and where it's headed. Or I'm interested to see where your thoughts are, in a year from now when you've been in New York for a year,
Right, totally. Well, I have a little bit of beef with New York comics because they have so much stage time.
Oh, yeah.
That I think they should be way much better. They're really cocky, but then when you actually go, I'm like, wait a minute, you get all this stage time and you're not better than me?
Well, the thing is, a lot of people, so when you're from a city that you get a lot of free stage time, like Chicago, a lot of people, they don't write. They write on stage.
I get that.
So because you're used to the stage time, you'll have an idea of something and then you work it out on stage. Because I know so many comics from Chicago that are brilliant comics, but they don't ever write anything down. So they don't write. So everyone's got their own style. But I also live with a comic who she wrote, she would write 2 hours a day, write out her stuff and really work out her stuff. And she's still, to this day, the only comic I knew that was still living in Chicago when she got Conan. You know?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, I think that everyone's got their own different style, but I think you do take for granted the stage time. And I miss it. That's one thing I really miss. And that's
you have to be, it's more like being a cactus out here. This really is the desert. It's like, you get so much less stage time. I watched so many New York comics come out here and like, oh, I got a development deal. I'm shooting a pilot. And then they came out here and like, they didn't know what to do with themselves because they just couldn't get time.
Well, it's also, you got to figure out, like, I'm finding out the balance of having my time one night, I'll write and I'll do sets one night, or I'll hang out,
right.
or I'll stay for my wait an hour and a half. If I don't get my name drawn, I'll go hang out at a club, because that sometimes is more beneficial, which seems backwards, but sometimes it's more beneficial
the hang is right.
Because that's so important. And in Chicago, it wasn't about that. So just learning.
Well, there's also that crazy part where, okay, when you start out, all mic time, even bad mic time, is good mic time. Mm-hmm. And then there comes a phase, probably around year 2 to 5, where
you're pickier.
Not just picky, but you go like, no, I should do this mic, like I should do this time. And then you go do it, and it's actually like, oh, afterwards it's so bad that it's like a setback. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I wish I hadn't done that set. So it's like, I mean, at first, like, all mic time is good mic time. And then you realize, like, not all mic time is good time. And like you're saying, it would have been better. Does this happen to you? This is one of my favorite weird things that happens over and over again. All right. So you do a gig. Like, let's say this. You go do a spot at the Improv, mm-hmm. and you kill.
Yeah.
And you're excited, and everyone's excited for you. And then you're just like, okay, well, let's keep the night going. So let's go up to the Comedy Store, just keep this going. And then you like go up to the Comedy Store, and like nobody knows that you killed down at the other club. So none of them, there is no momentum.
Yeah.
So like the whole thing of like, hey, let's keep it going, and you can't.
I actually like that. So when I've done like bigger shows or bigger opportunities,
right.
when I've done like, opened for somebody, did like a theater show or something, right. The very next day, I like to go to open mic to bring down my ego. Cause I don't want to have, cause the nice thing is like, there's always that balance. It's like, with stand up, there's always those ebbs and flows, you're like a roller coaster. So if I ever have like a really, really high, and I'm feeling really, and I know it when I'm feeling fucking cocky. Yeah. I know when I'm feeling like, oh, I've got this shit. Then just to check my own ego, I go to a shitty open mic and realize, okay, no, I'm not shit, So that way I can continue to be better. Because if you always think that you're the best, then you're not going to try hard. You're not going to become a better writer or comic.
I agree with everything you're saying, except I don't actually intentionally do that. I just find in my life, it's like, my best sets are often followed by the worst sets. Because when I first did, it was like the summer of 2003 is the first time I went on the road. And you do a thing up in the northwest called the Tribble Run. Mm-hmm. These are the first time you're doing half hours. And it's like, I have like every single, it's the first time I'm doing a half an hour. Mm. This is like, I broke sweats after I hit 12 minutes because it's just a different.
Yeah.
So one night, I want to say I was in like Salem, Oregon. And it was like, I hit it and I was like, I just solved comedy, right? I solved it. I solved stand-up comedy. And then, so the next night, I'm like, here's my set list, and it's like, I'm going to do it in the same order. And it's like an astronaut who like bounces off the atmosphere and you just die in space alone. Okay, like, so
here's space analogies today.
I'm a master of analogies, okay? I love analogies. But I'll tell you this one story because I know I'll probably have to go soon, and I'll tell you this one story. So like a year and a half ago, I'm opening for my friend John Sheezer. We used to do a Sportsaholic podcast. And I'm opening for him in Kansas, where he's from. And we're going to do 2 shows that night at Stanford and Co. Stanford and Sons. That's the name of the gig. We're driving on the highway. Now, Kansas City is completely flat. Kansas is all completely flat. And there's this massive thing in the distance, this really weird, tall structure. And I'm like, what the fuck is that? And he's like, oh, that is the world's tallest and deadliest water slide. And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah. He's like, back in August, a 10-year-old boy was decapitated. Oh. Right. Okay. So, yeah. And the thing is called it's the water park. There's a bunch of them called the Schlitterbahn, and the ride itself is called Verrückt. It's all German. And so the early show, we do 2 shows. The first show, I do so well. There was a couple that got married there that day. And we did so well, I literally performed for them again 4 months later in Miami, in West Palm Beach, at their honeymoon.
Oh.
Right? I mean, these guys they followed me. They bought merch from my headliner She's.
And this is back before,
No, this is a year and a half ago.
This is a year and a half ago.
This is a year and a half ago. So, I don't have SNL yet. But I kill. And part of it is like, so I warm up the crowd. I find out this couple's married, really getting along with the crowd. And then all of a sudden I'm like, hey, you guys have this killer water slide? And I start doing these jokes about the killer water slide. And I did about, just riffing, probably about 3.5, 4 minutes of it. And a bunch of jokes. And I'd go and I'd tell other jokes and I'd come back to it. And like I'm telling you, killed. Okay. Now, second show, remember I said there is no momentum. And, the new audience has been loading in, and I remember the guy who was going on right in front of me was saying something, and I was like, this crowd has no idea that I just did well. So I go up for the second show. 80 seconds. I'm not on stage 80 seconds, and I'm going to just tell one joke about the killer water slide. Oh. Right?
Yeah.
Because there are all these signs in Kansas City about with the the Ghostbusters slide. There's no handguns. You can carry in Missouri and Kansas. You can carry a gun, but don't bring it into our building. So no guns in this building. So I'm trying to do this joke about hey, I see all these signs about don't bring your gun in here, but I hear you have a killer water slide. Don't you get to defend yourself? That's the stupid joke. Mm-hmm. Okay, like I said, and the earlier show, and this is all in retrospect, you realize what you did wrong. Yeah, is that I had warned them that the crowd loved me. It's they relate to you and right. So 80 seconds, I do this killer water slide, and I just hear that all of a sudden, way in the back, it's like a 3-tiered, like an improv kind of setup. But from the back, all of a sudden I hear this, I just hear this, this woman scream in the back. And all of a sudden I can see a silhouette of this woman standing. And I'm like, what's going on? Am I walking someone? And all of a sudden I hear the woman go, I knew that boy! I knew that boy! It's like...
Oh, she started shouting it?
Oh, yeah. And her husband then and I'm like, I can only see the silhouettes. And then you see he wasn't a big guy, but you can tell he's puffed out his chest. And he's like, change the subject right now. Say something else right now. Oh, God. And all of a sudden, I'm 8, by the way.
And you're in Kansas.
I'm in Kansas, and literally her husband, and the other 8 people she was with, 10 people stood up and walked out of the show. Now, I still have to do about 20 minutes. And my headliner, who... has to do an hour after me. And I've just made a gigantic hole, which, by the way, I fucked the waitress, the servers who are in that area. Yeah. They're not going to get their 2-drink minimum. They're not going to get tip. Oh my God. So it's often right after you do something great, you do something horrible. The only other thing I want to tell you, one last thing, is you should always take, whenever possible, you're videotaping this. Yeah. And, whenever possible, young comics, you should see what you look like on stage. Mm-hmm. Because if you know what the audience looks like, what they see when they see you, all right? So, for example, like I was telling you, I went up for that Tribble run, those first half hours, and, I'm wearing a suit jacket and sort of a funny t-shirt and maybe an open college shirt and my blazer, and, this is how I dress in LA, right? And when I started, you're doing Idaho, Oregon, Washington, all these different gigs for half an hour. And it's 2003, and I'm trying to do some Iraq War smart material. And I realized that...
You weren't dressing smart.
No, it wasn't that. It was I came off as an LA elite douchebag. Mm. And it looks like I'm being smart and talking down to you people. And about halfway through the 2-week run, it's I'm a big football fan. I'm a big Patriots fan. I started just wearing my Patriot Tom Brady jersey on stage, which is literally red, white, and blue and the Patriots. And now instead of looking like an elite Hollywood douchebag that's talking down to you, I just look like a loudmouth at a sports bar who's shooting his mouth off. Yeah. So now I'm more relatable in a different way. So it's well, sometimes it's there'd be times where I might do breakup material or, dating material, but I don't look like a guy who's getting laid.
So that's what I've realized in LA that's different than Chicago. Chicago I dress down. Like I'd always wear a t-shirt, jeans, like and in LA, if I'm talking about dating, like it works way better if I'm wearing a skirt or, making more of an effort,
Yeah.
So I've noticed.
What does the audience see when they see you?
Yeah. But that's the other thing. It's like I'm not just one thing. I think that's everybody, but you can just adjust.
That's a hard thing too, is that your act can become a trap. Mm-hmm. It's like I used to do an opening joke that was like, I get it, ladies, I'm not your type. Mm-hmm. And I know we have to go. So like, I get it, ladies, I'm not your type. And then girls would come up to me, oh my God, it's so true, you're not my type. And I it's like all of a sudden I had this lovable loser character. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, if I ever want to date again, like I've trapped myself in an act like a fat comic that just like, okay, so you're going to do all these fat jokes. Now, if you lose weight, do you lose your act?
Yeah.
So
I guess it's the one plus about narcolepsy. There's no cure for it, so.
Did you ever fall asleep on stage?
No.
Not yet.
No, but it's like you don't sneeze on stage. I feel like it's not, your body knows you're being watched. It's
You don't sneeze on stage.
How many hours have you been on stage? Have you ever sneezed on stage? Ever?
I can't. You just sort of blew my mind. Like, now I have to think about it.
Yeah. There's one last question I ask people before we go, and I feel like I could talk to you for hours. I wish.
We'll have to do a sequel.
We'll have to do another one. But I always ask people. We didn't talk much about sleep at all this time, but we usually do. But
right. Let's sleep on the couch.
Oh yeah, but anyways, I always ask people what their dreams are for the future, like your goals, dreams.
Oh, I thought you meant because I've had weird dreams, which is like I had a dream about going back to SNL and that like haunted me, and then like I had an ex-girlfriend dream that really bothered me. The amazing thing is you talk about what my dreams are is that's sort of the crazy thing of where I am is I spent so much time sort of wanting like if you told me like, hey, you get to be you get to write on SNL and you get nominated for an Emmy. I'd be like, well, that's the dream. Mm-hmm. That's making it. Well, now I've done that. And nothing is actually what you think it is when you actually get it. And so now it's like I'm in this weird part of like, I'm no longer trying to do that because I've done it. So it's sort of like being like an astronaut after they left NASA. And I have to figure out what's next. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's like, it's a weird part where I have to be like, okay, I have this credit and, I have these awards or nominations, and you have to figure out, okay, now I have to write on my own, start, for me, it's like, now I'm going to start almost at the bottom of another comedy scene, which I don't know that well, which is New York. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if I have dreams. I just sort of, I'm waiting to see what's next. And I know that I can't rush it or force it. That's what I know, that you just have to let it come and recognize it when you see it.
Very good. Very good advice.
I'm full of good advice. I'm Erik Marino. I can make anyone 17% funnier.
Do you have a t-shirt that says that?
I do have a 17% funnier. There is a 7. It's the Marino guarantee. It's a whole thing. I can make anyone 17% funnier.
That's awesome.
The roast battle, Leslie Jones. I'm like the Forrest Gump of comedy. I've been around. Ellen.
Well, thank you so much for doing the podcast. We always end by saying good night. So good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks for listening to Sleeping with Sarah, where I slept with Erik Marino. Be sure to check out Punching Bag Comedy every Sunday in Brooklyn. Show at 6:30, mic at 8. If you like the podcast, please rate and review on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Google Play. We're brought to you by Audible.com. Go to audibletrial.com/sleepingwithsarah. I'm releasing a new podcast each week, so please tune in to find out who I have in bed with me next. Thanks to Josh Bryant for the music, and if you want to find out more, please go to sarahalbritton.com and follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Sarah Albritton. Until next time, good night.